We cannot conduct covert operations. If a committee puts out a report which refers to an activity which leaves out the name of a country or individual concerned, but gives enough evidence for any amateur sleuth to identify it beyond a shadow of a doubt in times for its identification to be carried with the news stories of the report itself.
That is the...
All right, but you believe you're consistent with the statutes, but there isn't any statute that prohibits your interception of domestic communications.
I believe that's correct.
What's up, guys? Spenny. One of the things that make my skin crawl every couple of months is a new compilation of news anchors using the exact same terminology, saying the exact same script about the exact same thing. You can put compilations together like this, and it really creeps you out.
Russian collusion.
Trump, Russian sort of collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion. Trump, Russian, metal collusion.
Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, potentially collusion.
Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, collusion.
Trump, Russian collusion. Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
Russian hacked our election.
Here comes a big change. Because all of a sudden, Trump, Russian, possible collusion, Russian collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion. Trump, the Russians, collusion.
Collusion with the Russians. Trump, Russia, possible collusion. Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
And you
collusion. Prove collusion.
look at them clapping. It's like they've been trained.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why it's so creepy to me is because now we're learning that Operation Mockingbird, which is, of course, the old CIA plot to control all of American media, is actually alive and well, based on an interview that we just wrapped with Tulsi Gabbard. Now, we've had little sprinklings of this here and there. For instance, James O'Keefe caught a CIA officer undercover talking about how they're going to put Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones out of jail because they refuse to repeat the established talking points. And we have Tucker Carlson many times over explaining that he's been pressured to repeat the established talking points. Well, what is this? Well, it's part of Operation Mockingbird. This is a operation that's well documented. Here at the CIA, for instance, reading room, hundreds of pages of the CIA pressuring or forcing reporters to write specific narratives. In some instances, according to these documents that are publicly available, imagine what's not publicly available, the CIA placed their own agents as reporters inside of newsrooms in order to literally be CIA vehicles and assets for what Americans are thinking. CIA's Operation Mockingbird was a supposed clandestine operation meant to manipulate the American media. Some believe it's still active today. Let's read. In 1977, journalist Carl Bernstein published an article in the Rolling Stone with serious allegation that hundreds of American journalists worked for the intelligence agency, the CIA. The operation for decades involved some of the most prominent news organizations in the world, including the New York Times, CBS, Time, and so on. Bernstein's reporting mostly focused on journalists who worked abroad, but ominous rumors soon emerged that the CIA was using reporters to spread propaganda across America, which is, of course, against the CIA's founding charter. They're not allowed to run operations domestically. They have to be clandestine. Of course, that's not true. They are using these reporters to manipulate public opinion at home. The program had a name, Operation Mockingbird. And what we found out is that Operation Mockingbird was absolutely real and that they had reporters in the biggest newsrooms in all of America. Reporters. They had CIA intelligence officers, assets, CIA agents just working hand in glove inside of newsrooms, writing articles, producing the news. Operation Mockingbird, in the New York Times, first published the article, Closer Than Expected Relationship Between the CIA and the Press. CIA director shared some details of the practice with reporters and finally had to fess up to congressional investigators. For decades, since World War II, when journalists came in close contact with CIA officers, obviously in the war zones, members of the Office of Strategic Services, which is the predecessor of the CIA, would often bump the reporters and get them to write what they wanted. In the 1950s and 60s, early part of the Cold War, the program was ramped up heavily We had journalists all over Berlin and Vienna to help us keep track of what was coming and what was happening. We were just running journalists. The program expanded and expanded and expanded, and as it goes, ladies and gentlemen, eventually you just ended up having journalists inside of the biggest news organizations in America being bankrolled by the CIA. They have it all dead to rights. This was all exposed in the late 70s. Bernstein wrote that the program composed of accredited staff members of news organizations, freelancers, editors, publishers, columnists, commentators who work for organizations like the New York Times, CBS, Time Magazine, and Newsweek. The CIA bankrolled foreign press services to provide cover for operatives. Ooh, baby. This is wild. After the publication, CIA officials told the New York Times that the number of journalists on the CIA's payroll was around 100. Okay. So 100 different journalists are being paid directly by the CIA. Look at this. This is crazy. Man, this is wild. Nobody's ever asked the CIA about this in modern times. Is it still going on? Apparently they stopped it. Yeah, well, we asked. We asked Tulsi Gabbard yesterday and went, thermonuclear virals, been seen by millions of people, shared by tens of thousands. Tulsi Gabbard confirming that Operation Mockingbird is still ongoing. What she told me was that, yes, this is still happening and that we are fighting to this day intel operatives that are running disinformation campaigns through the corporate press. Ladies and gentlemen, here's my question to Tulsi. The media being used as a propaganda mechanism, we saw it flatly. I mean, I think it's the smoking gun, quite frankly, of the Obamagate narrative and the Russiagate narrative, that it was so baked in that the New York Times and Washington Post went and ran with it. Some would say that that's part of Operation Mockingbird. Some would say that that's part of what we learned in the Church Committee, that the intel agencies were using media outlets as their mouthpieces, and that those mouthpieces would parrot the official narrative. And I wanted to ask you, is this operation still going on? Are you aware of the intel agencies working directly with media outlets in order to push prescribed narratives that may or may not be true?
It's something that we've already had to deal with, Benny, within this administration, where there are people within the intelligence community who believe that their will is more important than the will of the American people, and will weaponize intelligence by leaking it to their friends within the mainstream media with the intent of undermining President Trump's agenda. It is not one that he hasn't already talked about in every rally and town hall that he did throughout the campaign. I don't even know how many there were, but President Trump is enacting the very thing he promised the American people he would do in this election. So people in the intelligence community, they may agree, they may disagree. That's not the point here. As intelligence professionals, as people who work in the national security space, in the intelligence community, they are required to fulfill their mandate to their oath to the Constitution of the United States, and to the President of the United States, who was duly elected by the American people. Those who leak intelligence to their friends in the mainstream media with the intent of undermining the president who was elected by the American people, none of these intelligence professionals were. They are subverting the will of the people and therefore undermining the Constitution.
It's wild that you're still having to deal with that. Call it what you will. But Operation Mockingbird, just incredible that they were just out with it, that they were using the media as government organs to push propaganda, and it's still happening today.
This is why what we're doing is so important, Benny,
Yes.
and this is why President Trump's mandate in this is really critical, is by exposing the truth, by exposing the bad actors within the intelligence community and in the political space who are weaponizing intelligence to advance their own political interests, is so important to be able to turn the light on in places that have been dark for far too long, expose the truth, and drive accountability. That's the only way that we can actually shift this and begin the work to try to restore trust in the intelligence community.
This made some major news. We're proud to have asked. If you look at some of the things that John Brennan had been saying, he's been going on talking about how we need to reestablish the control of the media because the narrative's getting out of control here with Russiagate. Probably the best person to comment on this in my lifetime has been Tucker Carlson, who, when he was speaking with Adam Carolla, just directly called out Operation Mockingbird payroll ease on the CNN payroll. I know that he's talking about Natasha Bertrand here. She's the one who writes the Hunter Biden laptop stories and leaks the intel about the bombing in Iran and so on and so forth. This is what's going on. It's still actively going on at CNN. Tucker Carlson blowing it wide open. And he's been doing just the absolute best work on this. The rewriting of Watergate scandal, for instance, understanding that the people who broke the Watergate story, they're not journalists at all. They were operatives from inside of the Woodward and Bernstein. Like, Bob Woodward was a Navy intel officer. He was recruited by the CIA. He wasn't a reporter. He was there to take down an administration. Sound familiar? Here's Tucker Carlson wrapping it all up better than I could, but we're proud to contribute to all of this. And thank you, Tulsi, for being so honest with us.
What's your take on a Wolf Blitzer type? Because whenever I
take a close look at his history. Actually,
I'm always like, why would he do this? Why would he say a bunch of stuff he doesn't believe or he must know is untrue? Like, what? He sat there as this sort of elder statesman of news and just sort of lied right through COVID and many other subjects. Why would he do that? Why would he do it to his legacy?
I worked with Wolf for years, never had a problem with him. It was always nice. No one wants to hear it. I'm sure most people won't believe it, but I can tell you, having lived it for many years, it's true. The intel agencies have a big effect on what is broadcast on television and what you see on Facebook and Google as well. I mean, they're all up and down Facebook and Google, as I'm sure you know. And, there are a lot of anchors who, including people I know well and have worked with at different networks. I'm thinking of one in particular, a national security reporter who was just a mouthpiece for the Pentagon and the CIA and is knowingly telling lies on their behalf. That's very, very common, very common. And I can think of a number of people at CNN who I know for a fact are doing that exact thing. And so, they're reading government propaganda from the intel agencies knowingly. And I'm sure they've got some internal rationale that allows them to get up in the morning and face themselves despite having done something that dishonest. But I'm just telling you, bottom line, I know that is true. I'm not speculating at all. And in particular on the national security stuff, there are very well-known national security reporters, and I'm thinking of one female national security reporter in particular, who just reads lies from the national security state. And it's wildly frustrating. And it would just make me mad. Even if I don't agree with the lies, okay, but even if I did agree with the lies, I would be offended because they're lies. They're lies. Like when CIA and the Pentagon were claiming that Bashar al-Assad used poison gas against his own people. Okay, there was no evidence that was true. Maybe it was true. There was no evidence it was true. None. Zero. And I called them out, and they could not provide any evidence. And yet every national security, and it was a big deal. We killed a lot of people in response. We sent in missiles and killed a lot of people. We took human life in response to that claim. And it was, as far as I can tell, a lie. And every national security reporter, every channel repeated it uncritically. The Biden administration blew up Nord Stream and, created the largest act of industrial sabotage in history, the largest man-made CO2 emission in history, an environmental crime. This is a huge deal. This happened. And every national security reporter just looked right into the camera and said, well, we think Russia did it. Well, they knew Russia didn't do it. That's a lie. And they knew it was a lie. So I just think, and again, I'm not speculating. I spent my life in this business, so I've seen it. People underestimate the degree to which the people sitting on the news, possibly even Wolf Blitzer, are repeating talking points from the intel agencies and doing it on purpose. It's scary, man. Really scary.